it's Daz, and another week and more crazy things happen. I have a few things to share that have happened recently in my personal life as well as in the country. In the Kansas City area, there's been black bears sighted, which is rare because usually they stay south of I-44 in the Ozarks, but they're migrating further north because the black bear population is growing, and it's common for young male bears to try to find their own land, and they may wander 100 miles. So it is interesting to see this return of bears to northern parts of the state because they used to be all over the state, but due to deforestation, human settlement, and hunting, a lot of them nearly went extinct and stayed mainly in forested areas. Black bears, unlike grizzlies, can handle living in forests that aren't as dense. So, for instance, grizzlies, they need a lot more forest, so they thrive in states like Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, parts of Washington, and Alaska. There used to be grizzly bears in California, Utah, Arizona, but they pretty much went extinct with human settlement and hunting. And then there's Kodiaks, live on Kodiak Island in Alaska. Those are even bigger than grizzly bears. I heard rumors that there was a population of polar bears from the Arctic breeding with grizzlies, creating hybrids. They're not as common, but that's just a few fun facts about bears. But in Kansas City, it's been reported in a couple of suburbs sightings of a black bear, and apparently it's the same one, but then there's another one that got hit by a car. So it does go to show us that these black bears, probably 2 to 3 years old, are wandering around, and they're telling people to slip their trash cans, which is not something you think about being in Kansas City. I always see when animal behavior changes, that's usually a sign of the times, whether it's because of human behavior changes or because of the weather pattern changes, which we've had a lot of crazy weather. In other news, transportation workers across the country have been experiencing layoffs due to low funding, and this can impact people's ability to get to work, to get to school. And there's been lots of mass layoffs in the tech industry as well, as we see more of the automation of jobs. And as we see the rise of AI, that's happening. Also, the tariffs have been paused for 90 days between China and the US, which means they're trying to get people to spend. I feel like a lot of this is manipulation for panic buying, but people just aren't spending the same amount, or if they're spending, they're not spending it on useless things. People are probably spending more so on the bare minimum, but that's happening as well. Let me know in your stores if you've noticed not as much inventory. Have you yourself found yourself trying to prep, or have you just kind of said, it is what it is, I'm just gonna make do with what I have? That's kind of how I've been, because I remember during COVID, I was with my family and we bought a lot of stuff, and then some of it went bad in the end because it's like, we didn't use it all. And now I recently got married and I moved out of my family's house. And so I'm in a small apartment instead of a family home. So I don't have the space to prep and have a pantry. So I really do kind of have to be more frugal and trust God with the rest. Speaking of which, I have a story that happened that was, to me, at first I would have said this was just a random thing at night, but I'm starting to lean that I had a supernatural experience that bled into my husband's experience. So he woke up in the middle of the night around 3 a.m. and couldn't sleep, and he told me he looked at a verse like on the Bible app and then went back to bed. Because he woke up, it woke me up because I'm a light sleeper, and then I fell back asleep. And then like an hour later, I was having weird dreams, and then he's like, do you hear that noise? And then I woke up and I heard like a woman's voice. It sounded like a disgruntled woman, middle-aged, kind of sounded witchy. I know sometimes when people are heavy users of drugs or they're mentally ill, they can have a certain tone to their voice. And I honestly thought there was like a, lack of better terms, crackhead outside trying to get inside, like banging. Because I heard banging noise and it sounded like they were breaking things. And so I went to look outside. There was nobody outside. So I was like, okay, where is this coming from? And he thought it was coming from within the building. And I'm thinking, are the other tenants, like, do they have problems? Why is no one else reacting to this? Then suddenly the sound just stopped. And so I know a lot of people would say, oh, the crazy people, depending on the area you live in, that could be common. Because I was thinking maybe like someone who was homeless or transient was wandering around. They wandered into the back and did all that. But I'm almost wondering, since it was around the witching hour times, if it was a supernatural occurrence, because in other cultures, knocking in the middle of the night, those guttural voices are not that uncommon. And since I've moved here to St. Joseph, Missouri, this is where my maternal sides, like my grandmother, she lived in this area for a bit, and I have family members that have. We even have a case in my family that's unsolved where they lived in this area during times of like Reconstruction and Jim Crow. And if you know anything about American history, you know it was rough times. And I knew Missouri had been a slaveholding state, even if they were part of the Union because of the Missouri Compromise. But the river served as a freedom point. So enslaved people, if they could cross the Missouri River, they were free because surrounding states were free states. However, sometimes through intimidation, both abolitionists and those that were pro-slavery flooded Kansas. So there was a lot of like brawling. And then St. Joseph was a river town. So river towns have like a rough history, and there's a lot of bars and pubs here that you see to this day. But it was one of the last stops you could stop at before you pretty much headed out west, and there wasn't anything for miles. So having family on my mom's side being Black Americans during that time, it would have been a rough time to be in the U.S. anywhere, but especially in a state where there had been slavery and then it was abolished. And my great-great-grandfather, he actually worked in a railroad in Chillicothe, which wasn't uncommon back then for that type of work to be done. He ended up getting murdered at the railroad and his money cut up. And they believe it was a hate crime, and it was never solved. There was a family that was a witness to it, but they said they would talk, and they never did. So it was just always kind of one of those mysteries, because I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and because of my dad, who has no link to this area, like he's from Mexico, he moved us back down to the Kansas City area, and I lived in a suburb of Kansas City further east, but because of circumstance and getting married, my husband, he's from St. Joseph. I'm back in St. Joe, and it almost feels like I'm in a TV show where it's like when you get there, it's like you're unraveling pieces of the past. But since I've been here, it's not like I've had a lot of crazy experiences. Most of my nights have been normal, and I don't have sleep paralysis as frequent as I used to, like I talked about on the channel. But I did notice I did have a dream one night where I felt something hateful. It didn't want me here, and it wanted me to leave. It wasn't like my first night, it was just random. And then I had a vision the first time I took communion in this apartment that there was this white demonic figure trying to reach its hand in and open the door. So I found that interesting that like a couple months later I have that experience with the weird voice. And I also anointed the apartment too. So I just know like as believers we can be super sensitive, like I talked about in the Veil Walker video. And I do believe sometimes, depending on what's in your generational lines and with your ancestors, depending on where you go, if you have ties to an area, you can also experience irregular activity. But I wanted to share that as well because I do believe, like, a lot of people talk about skinwalkers and other types of weird phenomenon. I'm not saying it was that, but definitely seems like an evil presence was trying to make itself known and intimidate. I wasn't really scared. It was more like, I just want to go back to sleep. Why is this? What is this? We're also in tumultuous times as well with the world and everything happening. Like there's the conflict with India and Pakistan going on right now. And it's really like what Matthew 24 talks about of wars and rumors of war. I really encourage you to continue to really get in the word and to pray and to really stay vigilant and sober-minded. Now is not the time to go to sleep because there's a lot happening. Every day feels like a new chapter of something. So I'd like to know what you guys' thoughts are. As always, it's good talking to you. Have a wonderful weekend and rest of your week. Take care. God bless. Until next time.